Welcome to the Global Business Show. My name is Shannon Fleur. It is always a pleasure to be with you on Monday morning to bring you the expert on their field. And today we're having Martine Pierre. She looks young, but she does have 20 years of commercial banking, retail banking, finance, and sales management with an emphasis on employee consumer engagement. And she's also a coach. We met several years back, and at that time, she was the vice president of a bank. Now she's still the vice president of the bank, but the reason why we're bringing her today with us is because we're going to talk about the second round of PPP. And she is a consultant. She has been a consultant and a commercial lending consultant for a big company. So we're not going to talk about that. But I would like to share with you, my friend, Martine Pierre. Welcome, Martine.
Thank you, Gina. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
PPP, everybody's talking about it. And since our audience is mostly Caribbean, I would like for you to talk to me a little about commercial banking and the Black community because you have been vice president on several banks.
Mm-hmm. So with commercial banking, really, it's an area of opportunity for minority businesses overall. Only because when you're starting your business, there's often confusion around having capital access.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that really always troubles entrepreneurs, especially minority entrepreneurs,
Mm-hmm.
is the frustration with having access to capital. But all of the banks, they work in the same way that when you start a business and you don't have historical financial data to back up your request for funding, you're not going to get approved because the banks really don't have any history to show that your business was successful and is able to pay back the loan. Now, there's one caveat to that where for certain businesses, the SBA, the Small Business Administration, will provide guarantee for banks depending on what your project is. Certain
Mm-hmm.
projects they like, certain projects the SBA does not like. And what it does is if you, unfortunately, your business is not able to perform on the repayment of the loan, the SBA then will guarantee the bank a certain percentage and pays the bank back. So startup capital and access to capital during the first 3 years to 4 years of a business has always been very frustrating for everybody, but particularly for minority businesses.
From my experience, minority businesses, oftentimes I meet people who they have been in business for a long time, 7 years, 5 years, and they don't have a bank account. Do you encounter this kind of problem within the community? Because I often hear people say, well, does the government have money for somebody who wants to start a restaurant? But yet they don't either have the credit or they don't have anything to show that for the past 3 years that they've been banking and that whatever they were doing was either growing but was falling short of just one particular area, maybe marketing, maybe training. Do you encounter those clients in the Caribbean or I would say in the Black minority communities?
Now more so than ever. And the reason why now is because with the pandemic
Mm-hmm.
and the funds that are available right now via the SBA, whether it's the PPP or it's the idle loan, I'm finding out that the financial documents are not ready or there isn't a bank account or the entrepreneur is doing business in their personal account, which is a big no. The first thing that you want to do, and I'm sure their CPAs and their accountants tell them that you want to separate your personal expenses from your business expenses. That's a big no. You don't want to commingle the two. Now, naturally, there are a lot of expenses that you do, especially if you're a sole owner,
Mm-hmm.
you can pass some of your expenses into your business, but that's for your accountant or your CPA to work with you with your book of business, but you do have to separate the personal to the business. One of the reasons why they don't want to do that is because they say it's expensive to have a commercial checking account because the banks are charging $13, $21 a month if you don't maintain a certain balance. It
True.
is true, but not all banks do. There are still maybe a couple banks out there that will allow a small business to have a free business checking if they're
Mm-hmm.
doing less than 300 transactions, which typically a startup business does, less than 300, less than 500 a month.
But my audience, because we try to educate people in our minority community, I tell them that if you say that you want to do business and you want to take me, you want me to take you seriously, or the government or whoever might be able to lend you money, $13 a month, it's $130 for the year. So I feel like this is not a good excuse for somebody not to have a bank account, but it is so common. I used to encounter this when it comes to credit card, but with the banking, and I realized last year, just probably like you, that
Mhm.
it's an impediment to our community. But since you were doing commercial banking prior, I mean, before COVID, that was mostly what you were doing, commercial and retail banking. Was it
Mhm.
easy for Black people or minorities to get loan from what either the SBA or the bank itself?
I won't say that it was easy. The reason for that is because banks will always base their approval on a few key points. One of them we know is credit. Often, minorities, we confuse business credit and personal credit. It's one in the same. Your personal credit is always taken into consideration when you're doing a business loan. It doesn't matter if you're set up as an LLC or as a corporation. Typically, owners of 20% or more in ownership,
Mm-hmm.
your personal credit is taken into consideration. You have to give a personal guarantee. It's one in the same. So there's always that confusion where if the personal credit wasn't managed properly, that prevents you from getting the business loan. Another thing also is with cash flow, Jinan. A lot of small businesses, they have more so a tax strategy when they're
Mm-hmm.
doing their taxes rather than a business growth strategy. What I mean by that is at tax time, they're looking to save on their taxes, which is
Mm-hmm.
legitimate. They can do that. But when you're saving on your taxes, you're not showing the income that you need to show to a potential lender, showing that you'll be able to qualify and repay the loan. Because as bankers, we want to do loans, Janan, but we just want to make sure that you're going to have the ability to pay us back. It's not that we don't want to do loans, but we do want to see the cash flow. And often you'll see a thriving business in the community. You're saying to yourself, oh my goodness, that business owner is doing really good. They're always busy. Their restaurant is always, full of people. And when you look at their book of business, they're in the red. They're declaring losses. And, so when they're asking for loans, they just won't get it. And it really doesn't matter whether they're with a large bank or small bank. It's just very tough because they're in a tax saving strategy rather than a business growth strategy. You can't have both. You really can't have both.
And I think one of the reason why you were saying that the business and the personal are one and the same, it's because even if you have a business and let's say you're a solopreneur and you're probably a minority business with two or three people, you as a person needs to be a guarantor if you were to go get a loan.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And also I was thinking about credit line. Is
Hmm.
it common for minority business to come and said, well, I'd like to have a credit line?
No, I don't see it, and which is really very sad
Mm-hmm.
because the purpose of the credit line is to allow them to should I say, is to allow them, for example, to bridge the gap between their receivables, monies that they're bringing in and monies that they're paying back. It's
Mm-hmm.
very sad that I don't see the request because many banks have small credit lines under $50,000 that don't necessarily require financials for you
Mm-hmm.
to get approved, but you do have to have a credit score around 670, 680. You have to have a relationship with the bank. When you have a relationship with the bank, it makes a big difference.
Credit the credit line, I think it's important, especially when you're in certain specific type of business. For example, if you need to buy products, if you're in a cleaning business. And I don't think people in general or business owners, there's a lot of people who have jobs as who have businesses, have janitorial services, or they have trucks that are or they're in the trucking business, but they do not realize how important it is for them to have a credit line. But now, come 2020, you have been spending your whole year helping people with the SBA loan as well as their PPP application. Tell us, how was that experience with you or for you?
I apologize. I had to clear my throat for a moment.
Mhm. Yes, that's fine. How has that been for you, 2020, and the applications for PPP or the SBA? And if you could differentiate the two of them for our
Mhm.
audience.
So the frustrating thing for minority businesses is that the small businesses have not been able to take advantage of these two programs. The PPP, which is the Paycheck Protection Program, which is essentially a program to help replace salaries, your salary, salaries of your employees. And this is a loan that you don't have to repay back as long as you can show that you've used the funds for the right purpose, which is for payroll primarily. And the reason why our businesses in our community are not getting approved is because their payroll was never documented, or it's not documented well enough, Jinan. What's happening is that they pay under the table, or they're paying by checks. And so that presents a problem because there isn't a payroll record that you have to submit to the SBA, to the Small Business Administration, to show that truly you employ people, and then they need to provide you with the funding to avoid for you or these people having to go to unemployment. So the lack of payroll documentation is really a big problem. It is preventing our businesses from getting the PPP funding. The other program that's out there is the EIDL loan, the economic injury disaster loan. That particular one is the one that over 30 years you repay at a very low interest rate. And with that particular loan, the problem that's getting in the way is, again, it's not documented, the tax returns are not ready. So when we started PPP last year, either the PPP or the EIDL loan last year at the top of the pandemic, and the SBA was accepting tax returns either from year 2018 or from year 2019. I was frustrated to see that a lot of our businesses did not have tax returns prepared for 2018. 2 years later, the tax returns weren't done, so those people could not participate in the EIDL loan because you needed to have at least a 2018 tax return to be able to participate in the EIDL loan. And the big factor with the EIDL loan, in addition to not having the financials, is the EIDL loan. At first, the SBA did not declare a certain credit score to be qualified, but a number of our people, of our business owners, were turned down because the credit score was so severely damaged
Mhm.
that the SBA did not feel comfortable extending additional debt to them. So I've seen a number of businesses that have shut down for that particular reason.
Now, when you say a number of businesses have been shut down, and I'm smiling because I realize that most people don't realize that everything is connected, from your credit to your having your business to your declaring
Mhm.
what's going on in the business. Because I meet several folks, they're telling me that well, there was no money in the business, so I didn't make any money, so I don't understand why I should file tax. Somebody told me that if it's less than $10,000, I don't need to declare it. But now comes a pandemic, come a situation like that, a disaster where the government is trying to help, and none of those folks, they have any paperwork to show not only that they were in business, but that they had an employee.
Mhm.
And I think you would agree with me that it's common for somebody to tell you that they have a business, and when you ask them, so how many employees that they have, and they said no, none. And I ask them often, so how does the business run if there's nobody actually manning it?
Right, right. So that got in the way very much for a lot of people. You'd be surprised, even with the grants that were available through either the Broward County or the Palm Beach County, from the funds provided to our county from the CARES Act. One of the required documents was that our businesses had to have a business tax receipt,
Hmm.
right? I
And
know for
nobody
Palm
has.
Beach, nobody had it, and that was a no-go. If you didn't have it, you were not going to even come near that 25,000 or fifteen thousand
Yes.
dollars. And that was sad because it costs what, $30 a year, $40 a year to have one. So I watched many businesses not being able to take part in that grant, the grant funding.
Now, bittersweet, but I have to say it. So the whole year went by,
Yeah.
and we're gonna jump back a little with the forgiveness. But now that the second round of PPP is coming around, do you feel like the same folks who do not have the discipline of making sure that their books are in order or that they report their revenues, would they be going to the same trouble again because they didn't have their tax receipt last year? Most likely they wouldn't have it this year.
Yeah, so with the forgiveness, it's twofold. There's a forgiveness and there's the second draw, right?
Mhm.
PPP. The forgiveness is a bit of a nightmare for our small business community, for minority business communities, because the PPP was intended for payroll. And you could use it 100% for payroll, in which case you would have full forgiveness. You wouldn't have to repay it back. Or you could use 60% payroll, 40% for other expenses. To
Okay.
my disappointment, the funds were used otherwise. People invested them or they purchased
New
things.
cars.
Yes, it just was not intended for that purpose, or they're not able to provide how they paid themselves or the employees with those funds. So two things are going to happen from that. Number one, the SBA reserves the right to conduct an audit up to 6 years.
Mhm.
So you do want to make sure that you regulate your documents, you work on them as much as you can, because not only will you not be forgiven, but that might prompt an audit of your books, because it's intended for you to apply for forgiveness. They just don't understand it if you take the money and now you don't apply at all for forgiveness. Now, with the second round of PPP,
Mhm.
you don't have to have had the forgiveness to apply for the second round of
Mhm.
PPP,
Mhm.
which is really nice. You don't need to have had the forgiveness to do that, but you do need to have used all of the funds from the first round of PPP before they disburse new funds to you. So it sort of goes hand in hand, but the biggest problem is, those that did get the PPP, quite a bit of people they did not document it well. So they're paying their employees via Zelle or via Venmo.
Cash app.
Tough, Cash App. It's tough to document that. The easiest thing is, if you're not using a payroll company to run your payroll for you, which I always recommend, but if you're not doing that, pay them by check. And on the memo line at the bottom of your check, write that you're paying Martine Pierre Paul payroll week of January 1st. That's the way you do it, because then when you submit that to the SBA and to the bank, there is no question. I mean, it's valid.
Mhm.
So the paperwork is really tough. It continues to be tough. And for the second round of PPP, now you could still provide your 2019 tax returns and your 2019 payroll, which is really good. They're not really requesting 2020 because that's not ready yet. But the caveat to that is you have to prove that you had a 25% of revenue reduction in 2020 compared to 2019. So you have to show bank statements, you have to show profit and loss, you have to show comparisons, you have to show financial report documents to show which quarter in 2020 was you incurred a loss of 25% or more compared to 2019. They really want to see that the pandemic has impacted your business. If you suffered zero loss in 2020, and if your business grew in 2020, which some businesses did,
Mhm.
you really wouldn't qualify for a second round of PPP.
Now, let me recap this part that you just talked about so I could keep it into context. So, if somebody had a business and they did not have their payroll on point, where they were either having an accountant or a bookkeeper keep their
Mhm.
payroll, they felt somewhat to understand that even with the loan that they gave them, they had to actually prove that once the government gave them that money, they had to go back and prove that they actually did what they were supposed to do with that money.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because I
Absolutely.
was.
Now, for loans that are under $150,000,
Mhm.
the documents are a little bit less,
Mhm.
but you still have to go back and provide how you paid, because they're looking for you to have used those funds for payroll at 100% or at a minimum 60%. Because the idea was, these people you employ, because you had money from the government to pay them during the pandemic, these people would not have gone to unemployment to claim unemployment benefit. I mean, it goes hand in hand. When they offer you that money, there's a reason for it.
Yeah, it's a form of check and balance. They give you the money so you could pay your employees and keep them
Yes.
employed so they don't go and apply for unemployment. So now,
And
if
our
you
unemployment numbers are lower. Absolutely. Yeah.
We need to remember that the Social Security just tracks you down everywhere you go.
Everywhere.
It's truly sad that I felt like I have met folks who kept on saying that the government is giving money. That money wasn't a gift. That money was something that required for you not only to have your paperwork in order, but also to have the discipline to be accountable for it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because now the accountability is here where you have to go back and show.
And earlier you say that once they give you that money, you as an employer as an employer, and maybe that's the reason why some folks decided like, well, you know what, I don't want to go after that government money. And you say that they and up to 6 years they could audit you. Now an audit doesn't necessarily that it's mean that it's a bad thing. They could
No.
audit you and then you bring your papers and everything is right. But if they audit you and then for the next 4 years you have not put your paperwork in order, what does that mean? They levy your bank, they put you in
There
jail.
are fines. There are fines. You can get charged
Okay,
fines,
fine.
unfortunately, up to imprisonment.
Oh, it's fine up to imprisonment.
Yes. Yes. So it's pretty severe.
Yeah. So definitely it wasn't some money they were giving away. And even if we want to see minority and small business take advantage of that PPP loan, but I would also um, take responsibility in telling everybody who listens to me, when you start your business, not only you need to be able to declare your employee, you need to be able to check with the Florida Department of Employment. You need to
Mhm.
have a CPA, you need to have a bookkeeper, you need to have an accountant, you need to have an enrolled agent. Anybody needs that might be able to get you out of trouble. And when I say get you out of trouble, not necessarily because you're in trouble, but sometimes it's best not to get in trouble than to actually be in trouble.
Absolutely. The small business owner, they get into business to do something that they enjoy,
Hmm.
and that's their expertise. So the books, the legal issues, the banking, they really should leave it to the other professionals if that's not their line of business. And that costs money to have a bookkeeper, a business consultant on staff, but you do need to have that expertise not only to prevent you from getting in trouble, but also to help you set your business the right way. And you need to be upfront. One thing that I tell my minority business owners is we tend to be transactional. We don't tend to have relationships that are going to help us from point A to point B. If you're sitting down with your business consultant or you're sitting down with your CPA or accountant or your banker, you do need to talk about your short-term plan and your long-term goals.
That's
Because
right.
what actually happens is a decision you could make today, a financial transaction you make today, could prevent you from achieving your long-term goal. So your partners, who is your entourage of those professionals that are helping you, they need to know what those goals are. That's why you have to choose people you trust so that you can talk to them openly. You're not withholding information back because that transaction, it's as if somebody comes to me and they say, I want a car loan, right?
Hmm.
And I offer them a car loan for a car that costs $50,000. They never told me that they were on the market to purchase a house, right? Well, that
Okay.
was a wrong transaction to do today.
Hmm.
You should not, you understand? So you
Hmm.
really can't be transactional. You have to be relationship based. And I encourage our people in our community to be friends with their bankers, because the big problem last year, Jinan, if you remember, the big corporations, they were the ones that got to the bank first because they had their banker's cell phone number. They knew the branch manager. Where our community, we were calling the banks and the banks weren't answering their phones.
Hmm.
I'm a banker and I know that. But you've got to make it a point. If you're banking at a bank, you're there, you're giving them your business, you need to meet the branch manager. You need to meet the decision makers so that when you have a need, they know who you are and they'll take your phone call.
That is so important what you just said. And I remember, I'm not going to call my bank's name, but they say that if you are using a bank and you use um, the same facility, the same location, you save over $1,000 a year just because of that relationship that you create with them. And oftentimes people did not realize that, like for example, my bank until now, even when they had to open an account, they were distancing. So you cannot actually walk into the bank. They need to make an appointment with you. Now, tips and advice for our minority who might have not taken advantage of the first PPP, and right now they realize if they're really looking at themselves in the mirror that this round would actually probably go and then they won't take advantage. But
Yeah.
as a whole, a small business owner, and earlier to your point where you say sometimes it seems costly to have the person who's doing your payroll and an accountant and a bookkeeper, but if you're in business to make money, how are you gonna make money if you don't spend money?
Yeah.
It's not a matter of I'm not spending anything and I want my customers to pay. I want give them the benefit of having credit card, and it's a narrative that I think we need to change.
Mhm.
How do you want to bring this to our people for them to understand that what you were saying about growth, about relationship, is definitely or probably the only way to go to move forward?
It is. And the good news is right now, it's not too late for our entrepreneurs, our business owners to sit down with their CPA or their accountant to help them come up with the documents that they need to apply for the second round of PPP. The
Hmm.
reason why is because the SBA and the government, they know that your tax returns are not ready. So at this point, they're accepting certain drafts
Hmm.
of what would be a part of your tax return, providing that that's the same numbers they're going to see when you submit a tax return. So a good example is a lot of our small business owners, they use a Schedule C inside of their tax returns. So that because that's where their income, their profit and loss, that's where it is. And for the PPP, that's the document they look at if you're a Schedule C earner. So the SBA will accept a draft. So you go see your accountant right now, your CPA, and then you come up with the draft of that Schedule C, right? You're still not doing your taxes because
Hmm.
they're not submitting taxes yet. And you provide that number so you can apply for the PPP. As long as when your CPA or you submit your tax return to the IRS, that number matches. The problem we saw last year is the numbers that were submitted for the applications, Jinan, was not the number. They weren't the numbers on the tax returns. Can you imagine? Because when you go to the SBA, they're going to want the government to provide a transcript of your taxes. You can't have double sets of documents, essentially with the same agencies or agencies that are brothers, so to speak. It doesn't work that way. So a tip is sit down with your CPA right now or your accountant right now to talk about your documents, especially if you're doing if you're looking for that Schedule C, especially if you have employees that really should be on 1099s, that you had independent contractors that should be in 1099, do that. Another tip also is if you are hiring a professional or a friend or family member to do your PPP for you or your PPP especially, be absolutely sure that they're not inflating your numbers because regardless of who does your application for you, you are personally responsible and liable for the information that's on that application because the government and the SBA, they're relying on you just certifying the information. There's not a whole lot of verification that's being done. So what you say goes. So you have to be sure you're responsible. It's not, if something goes wrong, it's not going to be the business consultant. It's not going to be the CPA. They're going to come back after you because you're certifying that the information that you're providing to the government is correct. That's very important. There's no if and buts or about this. They will not forgive you because you are responsible and you're certified that that information was true. We need to be very careful about that. That's very key because that audit, they reserve the right to audit anybody. It doesn't matter the size of your loan if they feel there's a reason to audit you.
Martine, what you said is so important. I have to tell my audience also that you are the vice president of the Palm Beach Steering Committee for the Chamber of Commerce. So, like I said in the beginning, we bring you the expert, the people that we know and the people that we trust. And oftentimes when people call me and they say, "ZJ, can you do your PPP for me?" I'm like, "No, I'm not doing it. I have somebody who does that, and this is Martine." And those people need to understand, just like you said, if the information that they give their brothers and their sisters, because I had a gentleman call me and he says, I would like to reapply for the PPP loan. And I said, so what happened before? Because I tried to do a triage before I send them to you, Martine, because I know that it will be overwhelming to deal with all this mess. And he said, well, somebody applied for it for me, and the person put numbers that were not true. So I
Mhm.
refused to accept it. And I said, well, so you would have to show me what those people had put on your application before I refer you to anybody. He says, well, the person had died.
Mhm. Mhm.
So what it's the same as the tax preparers, and I think they had changed the laws. Once you receive the money, I know people have said that they had 25 employees when they just opened a business. So how do you have a store that you open like 5 months before COVID, and you see that you have 25 employees and you can't even show any revenues or any spending from your company? And those, we will tell you folks, didn't you say that it goes from fine to imprisonment?
Yes, because they look at it as fraudulent activity.
Yeah.
Because
So,
you should know, you really should know if you have 25 employees or not. I mean, they look at it that way. What I tell them is I say, look, that happened in the past, the first
mhm,
round,
mhm,
but you can't continue to make the same mistake you made before. So if you're going to go for a second round of PPP, a second draw, you really need to go with actual numbers, because the worst is to have made the mistake the first time and to go and to make it the second time again. Now that you know that what happened in the past, the numbers were wrong or whatever the problem was, you can't continue with that. You really have to go with actual numbers, and that is based on payroll. The PPP is based on payroll, and so you really should know what your payroll is. I know there was a lot of confusion, and I call it tough love, Jinan, because I'm ultra conservative. It's the banker nature in me. Bankers, we like proof of everything. We don't touch anything unless we see the proof.
that's
But
right.
that's the way that we can move our community forward if we're going to play big time, as small businesses in the US. We really have to fix the things that we did wrong in the past, right? Whether we knew or we didn't know, we need to fix them and move forward and move in the right direction, with the right books, with working on our credit so that we can qualify for loans in the future. For example, the idle loan. If you were declined for credit, the SBA allows you the opportunity to fix your credit or to provide an explanation about the credit so you can come back up to 6 months and ask for reconsideration. When they turn you down, it's not like it's definite, but they still give you the opportunity to fix it. So it's not too bad. And in my 20 years of banking, Gina, and I tell people this is the best commercial loan that I've ever seen anywhere, where you're getting a loan for 30 years, low interest rate, no collateral. You can prepay it with no penalty. I have never seen any bank offer that product as long as I've been in banking. So I really want our businesses to take advantage of it, because it allows them to keep their business going. That idle loan is for your working capital. It's because the government knows that you're not bringing in as much revenue as you used to bring pre-COVID. So they're providing you with working capital to pay your bills, your expenses, your monthly expenses, to keep the business going. Again, that's the purpose of the idle loan. So to get that loan, and sometimes it's a very large amount, for 2.75 if you're a nonprofit, 3.75 if you're for a business, for 30 years is really a good loan. I want us to be able to take advantage of these things, but we need to be prepared. We need to be ready. The good news is the idle loan is open until December 31st, 2021. Now it's until funds are available. If the date is December 31st, but if the funds are no longer available, they will pull the program back as they did before. So you have time really to work on your credit if that's the issue, so that you can participate in that program, because it's really a very good loan. I have not seen anything wrong to say about the idle loan. I really want our businesses to take advantage of that so that they can keep their business going. The PPP is set to close March 31st of 2021, but you do know that the funds for the PPP always go really fast, really, really fast. So get together with your CPA, get together with your tax preparer, and see if they can help you come up with the right documents for the second draw of the PPP.
And can they call you? Because I actually gave out your number, which is the 561-351-6200. I'm not sure if you give consultation because whether they're banks, or I should say their bankers or their CPA should be able to route them. So those people are the one who should give them free consulting. But you as a consultant, if they need to reach out to you, they need to understand there's a fee for service because you would be either reviewing or helping them with that. But quickly, am I right?
Well, so the thing is, the beautiful things for the people in our community is because I offer the advice for free, especially when it comes to PPP. And because I'm attached to a bank, I can offer the advice for free. And I love educating people. I do. However, I can't do everything. So for example, while we can do the PPP at the bank, we can't do the idle loan. So I have to refer them out to a partner that will do it for them. But if it's to give advice, and I do it all the time about the PPP, I'm happy to do it, Jinan, because these are your viewers, and I want them to do really well.
Yes. Well, you see, I appreciate it. So now they got something for free, but they need to come to the bank, and I know that's very important because they cannot call you and ask you to do that outside of the bank since you're educating them.
Yes, because the bank does require that you become a client of the bank to do
Mhm.
your PPP. So it's not totally free. You still have to give me business.
But in business, I often say it's a win and win situation because if you're not banking with us, it's the same as when they do the notaries and everything else. If they're not banking with you, it's hard for you to vouch for them and their business or anything like that. So I do appreciate that. But last question that I have before maybe you will think about one more advice that you should give them. This round of PPP, they opened it for Chamber of Commerce.
Yes.
But considering that, let's say I'm the only employee for my chamber, I'm the only person who has a W 2. So those people need to understand that it's not because it's open for all the chambers that all the chambers are eligible.
Correct. You still need to have that payroll. You
Yes.
have to have, it's for payroll. It's to replace the salary of the one person that you have or the two people that you have. You need to have payroll. You
And
have
I
to have
think,
people staff.
and I also think there was a minimum of employees that you were supposed to have. Is there for
For
the
the
nonprofit?
PPP, for no, it could be just the one.
Okay.
Yeah, it could be just the one.
And the nonprofits.
The nonprofits qualify as well, same parameters. They qualify, which is beautiful because at first they didn't. So your 501c3s, they qualify. The problem with that is sometimes when you're dealing with the religious organizations, they give gifts to either the pastors or the visiting pastors. So those are not, it's not considered
Consider the
payroll.
payroll.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, unfortunately, most of our nonprofit, the churches and all, they usually say that they have no employees, which is something that they need to change. This is
Yes.
definitely a narrative that they need to change because you cannot have a business in the United States or anywhere in the world and say that the business is automatic, it's running itself.
Yes, and they also need to keep a book of their records, also their accounting records, because if you're 501c3, you're exempt. You don't file a tax return, but when you're applying for either a grant or a loan, they are asking you for financial records, whether it's a P&L, a profit and loss, or they're asking you for your Form 990. You still need to provide some sort of accounting of your receipts and your expenses, even if it's a church. So that's preventing quite a bit of our nonprofit organizations or churches from participating not only in the idle loan or the PPP, but also with some of the grants that were available for nonprofits. They just didn't have a book of business to show that, this is how much they bring in, because essentially those funds are to replace money that you lost because of the pandemic. So if you had a church that had 400 members, and because of the pandemic, only 100 or maybe 25 are coming and contributing, you have been impacted by the pandemic. But For the SBA to work with you and to give you funds, you have to be able to show that. You can't
Mhm.
just say, well, I had 400 people, now I only have 25. It doesn't work that way. You have to be able to have receipts to show the contributions year over year. They want to see all that, even though you're a religious organization and you're doing the right thing for the community. It's still, it's a financial transaction. And that gets really tricky with the religious organizations. And I tell them all the time, I say, it's not that I'm focused on money, but that's my expertise. That's what I do. So even if you're a church, we still need to look at your profit, at your loss, how you're running the business. We want to see your book of business, because otherwise there's no way to prove that you were impacted by the pandemic. So yes, they do need a book of business as well. They need to keep records of what they bring in every month. As a matter of fact, if they want to purchase their building, any bank is going to ask for 2 or 3 years of financial for the church.
Miss Pierre Paul, it was such a pleasure speaking with you. I'm going to encourage the folks to visit you and to call you at 561-351-6200. But before I go, this is my first time doing a Zoom with you, and I love you for being always proper and you have good etiquette. And I know that your banking background makes you always want to ask for evidence. And even if you're asking people for evidence, it never looks like you're telling them, well, it's this or that. You are also part of an organization called Modern Etiquette and Leadership Academy, where
Yes,
you consult for etiquette, because
I do.
oftentimes people don't understand how it is when you have to go to the bank, how you present yourself, the business protocol. Shortly, you're going to give yourself a big shout out for being part of this organization.
Oh my goodness, Jenna, that's my baby. That's my baby. I actually founded the Modern Etiquette and Leadership Academy because being in banking, you use your social skills all the time. And many of us in our businesses, we do that. And that's important for you to keep business, to bring in new business, or it can cost you business. So the business protocol for our business community is key. So I enjoy just talking to people and teaching people about it. One of my biggest thing is the dining for dollars. Right now, we're not really doing it. If you're taking somebody out to lunch and you're talking business, there's a whole set of etiquette that goes into place. That is my passion. I can talk about that for hours, and so that is my baby.
We will definitely have a chance to do that because it started a little before COVID, but definitely we will have you come and do a webinar or a workshop for our business owners, our entrepreneurs, our solopreneurs, and I think coaching is something that is very important, and you never learn enough. So thank you
Absolutely,
so
absolutely,
much
my
for
pleasure.
having us. Thank
Thank you,
you.
Dan.
You're welcome. We were on the Global Business Talk Show with Martine Pierre. She is the vice president of the Palm Beach Steering Committee for the Haitian American Chamber of Commerce. She's also an SBA consultant, and she had given us valuable information about the PPP and how you should run your business. Thank you so much for being with us this Monday morning, and we hope to be with you next week.